really for the industry, the biggest threat is the unknown. It seems like all of this tariff policy is changing day to day, hour to hour, and it's really hard for the industry to kind of latch onto something and make plans, either short term or long term, for what's going on with tariffs.
Hello and welcome to the Pumps and Systems podcast. I am your host, Tom Baer, a managing editor with Pumps and Systems magazine. Today, we're going to be speaking with Patrick Hogg from Nidec, who's going to discuss the various uncertainties the pumping industry is faced with right now, from tariffs to economic policies to energy efficiency. So, without any further ado, let's get into the episode. Welcome to the Pumps and Systems podcast. So how are you today? I'm asking you for the first time because I definitely did not forget to hit record earlier.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for having me on. It's going great today. I'm excited to be able to talk to the industry about all of this turbulent stuff we're having go on, specifically with the things we're going to talk about today. So excited to be on here. And again, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here. Okay, so yeah, as you said, we're going to be talking about some pretty topical stuff today. Economic policy, tariffs, lots of changes that are affecting the pumping industry. But before we get into that, would you mind introducing yourself for those of our listeners and viewers who are not familiar with you, which some of them may be because you have been here before?
Yes, this is my fourth Pumps and Systems podcast. So I know quite a bit of the people in the industry. I go to a lot of the industry events and conferences. So a lot of the people probably know me there. But if you don't know me, my name is Patrick Hogg. I'm the VP of Marketing for Nidec US Motors. I've had a whirlwind of experience for the 18 years I've been in the pumping industry. I started with application engineering, product management. I was director of engineering and moved back over onto the marketing side where I could influence the market a little bit better. So I am part of HI, Hydraulic Institute. I go to those meetings, which a lot of this up here is from HI. These are publications that we've done together through HI and the help of all of that industry and conference that happens there. Right now, though, I'm over all of marketing for Nidec US Motors. So very into the pumping industry on that side. But overall, excited to be here again and excited to talk about some of these things.
That's great. Well, we're really excited to hear what you have to say. Okay, so with that, let's get into our main topic. So we'll start with what exactly is it that is causing uncertainty within the pumping industry these days, specifically to do with U.S. economic policy, federal policies, things like that.
So I'll just go ahead and put the big elephant in the room and notice it, right? It's tariffs. Since the beginning, well, let's say halfway through January, the threat started to loom, and now the threat has become reality. And really, for the industry, the biggest threat is the unknown. It seems like all of this tariff policy is changing day to day, hour to hour, and it's really hard for the industry to kind of latch onto something and make plans, either short term or long term, for what's going on with tariffs. The other thing that kind of comes around is the federal spending. Past years, we were extremely excited in the pumping industry about IIJA, the IRA, these federal spending bills that came in that were going to put an influx of funding into the pumping industry to build water, wastewater treatment plants, flood mitigation, all of these things. And with the new administration coming along, what's going to happen with this funding overall? So that's creating some turmoil on how do I make sure my funding is still going to be there? What's my market going to look like in a year? What's my market going to look like in 2 years? And then looming over all of this inside of it are the products that get put into this. And that's really driven right now by efficiency policies. With when you get a new administration, a lot of the policies that are coming through get paused so that that new administration can look at it and say, is this really where I want my administration to go? So a lot of the efficiency regulations that everybody was pushing, everybody was really looking into, have kind of been paused. So what does that do to the industry? So right now, as a whole industry, there is a lot of uncertainty, and it's big uncertainty. It's not small amounts. These tariff amounts are very large. You have to make short-term decisions with uncertainty because we don't know what's going to happen day to day. And so the really right now with the industry is how do you make day-to-day decisions that you're going to be best for your business as well as the industry?
So, can you tell us a little more about the uncertainties in these policies? So, what exactly is going on there?
Yeah, so the biggest uncertainty, as I kind of have pulled it down, right, is the fact that tariffs are changing from day to day. Right now, we don't know what the percentage of reciprocal tariffs from China. I think it's changed every day for the last 3 days. And when these tariff changes or these changes on tariffs overall come out, the announcements come out. And for the industry, it's very important because I always call it the wave of supply, right? If you're at the end of it, you're talking to the end user. That end user wants to know how much more they're going to pay. Well, that goes to the next person in the supply chain and it comes all the way down. So they want to know right away. The end user wants to know right away, how much am I going to pay more? Well, then the next person in the supply chain has to ask their suppliers, and that web just goes down. Well, when the change is happening so quickly, it's hard to make policies that way. And with the quickness that this is happening, the written laws that come with it don't get written as quickly. So the ones that are trade compliance groups really look at and say, this is the black and white, they don't come out soon enough. So to make those decisions this quickly is very hard. So there is a lot of risk out there in the industry of how much more am I going to pay on supplied product? And you ask your suppliers and they don't know because they don't fully understand the laws as they are. They can read them or hear them even really with the how they come out and not fully understand them. So right now that uncertainty is what is real, what is not, how long are these going to stay in, what will stay in long term, what won't. And so when you're looking at business strategy and planning, how do you make long-term plans on something that you don't know exactly what's going to happen? So that's the biggest uncertainty right now is tariffs. The other one is that I mentioned is the spending, the federal spending. So first you want to know how's my supply going to be? What do I have to charge my customers, or what is my supply going to charge me on tariffs? But the next is, where are my products going? Who's funding my products? So the IIJA is a couple years old now, and the key there, this was the Investment Jobs Act, where it was going to put trillions of dollars into our infrastructure. The IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, came in a couple years later, did the same thing. So the good news about this is this administration has kind of come in and a lot of their goals still align with the infrastructure update, right? When you look at tariffs and the plan for the tariffs, like the overarching goal about tariffs is bringing production, bringing that business back into the US. Well, with that, we need that infrastructure. So that funding is still going to be used. Now, is it going to be used on the same projects? That's where you start kind of getting a little bit different administrations looking at it differently. And the biggest sector that has the risk in federal funding right now is the alternative energy. And we kind of know this administration and how they've acted in the past. So that's the good news is we know that that alternative energy is going to kind of come out, which again, that kind of ties into the next topic of uncertainty, which was the efficiency regulations. They kind of go hand in hand. So we're really waiting to see how this administration really attacks this alternative energy because we're still getting a bunch of that funding into water, wastewater infrastructure overall. We can't not do that. And a lot of the things that came out of the tariffs on these businesses bringing production back into the US, they're going to use some of that federal funding for the building of their production plants and those types of things. So as a pumping industry, we still are a main portion of that infrastructure. So a lot of that IIJA funding is still there. Another big proponent of that is BABA, Build America, Buy America. And we're getting a lot more black and white on that. I've presented several times at NGWA and HI a couple times on what that gray area is, because that was a big gray area for a while, Tom. And so now it's a little bit more black and white on Build America, Buy America product. And this tariff kind of helps with that as well. It's in the same vein. So we've got that, but this kind of rolls around and says, hey, if you're not going to invest in alternative energy, what is your thoughts on energy efficiency? And within the pumping industry, we know the last 3 years has been crazy push towards quite a few different DOE efficiency regulations. And so the uncertainty there is what are they going to push through? What are they going to pull back? What can they pull back? And how does that look? Because again, we were preparing our supply chains to go a certain route. And if we're going to have to pivot, we need to know as soon as we can to be able to serve our customers the best way as a pumping industry, right?
Yeah, and with all this uncertainty going on and just not sure what's going to happen or even what's happening now, how do you see the industry reacting to all these policies and changes?
That's a very interesting question because it's such a wide breadth, right? The first thing is, like I said, you can't make plans off of where we're at now because of how it's changing. So a lot of the industry I see is in a sit and wait. They want to take in and absorb as much knowledge as they can of all the situations so that they can then make those decisions. The problem is usually you sit there and you absorb that information and you make a change. Well, every day I'm absorbing new information and that affects that decision. So on the tariffs specifically, it's a wait and see. We have to react because, that's going to affect our bottom line. And so the key is communication. What can you communicate? What can't you communicate because of the black and whiteness of these tariffs? And they keep changing. So right now on the tariff side, I see a lot of wait and see and adjusting to what am I actually going to get charged on? And let's focus there. How do I mitigate what I'm getting charged now? But making long-term plans for tariffs, like overall the industry, if they want to move a production plant, if you want to move something like that, that doesn't happen in 6 months. That doesn't happen in a year. So now all of a sudden you're talking about these long-term plans for something or a administration that's going to be around for 4 years that don't know exactly how long or how much these tariffs are going to affect it because that's what's going to protect you moving your production are these tariffs. So are they going to stay around? Are they going to be large enough to be able to protect this movement? So right now that's the biggest uncertainty, and that's kind of how I see that the industry reacting is we all know what the end game want of the administration is, and how do we kind of pivot to meet in the middle there and make sure we're at the right place and we are set up to make a move while still protecting the business as well as our customers. On the spending side, I think this is one of the little bright spots, right? The federal spending, they're going to keep pushing that because if they want anything to happen on the tariffs and product production coming back, they're going to have to spend on the infrastructure. And so we just, as a pumping industry, have to be there, have to be able to talk the talk with the administration. We have to be visible. We have to be heard. So get out there with Hydraulic Institute on the motor side. We are part of NEMA, so we have a lot of say with what happens in Washington through these industry conferences and industry groups. So if you're not part of HI, if you're not part of WEF or something along those lines, be part of them. Get your words out there, get your voice heard so that we see and we are heard as a pumping industry at these levels to make sure that that funding is continuing to come through and make sure we're on the forefront of making some of the decisions. Because I say that to talk about the energy efficiency uncertainty, right? So we're at the forefront of the energy efficiency, mostly on the pumps, but it seems like the government did make some decisions on their own or took some things out of there. So it's always nice to be on the forefront to make those decisions so that they're not surprising to the industry or to you as a manufacturer. And this kind of goes into, so the DOE had a lot of energy efficiency, 3 or 4 specifically on the motors that were coming through, several on the pumps that were coming through this year. Well, when the new administration comes in, as I mentioned before, they kind of pause those so they can review them. And right now they haven't been continued. So some of them they can't take back because of actual laws with they've made it far enough through the process that they can't do it. But what they still can do is pause it, maybe delay what's going on, switch some things about. But overall, as an industry, we have to prepare for the future. Variable speed in pumping is the future here. And it's not because it's some manufacturer is making a better product or this or that. It goes down to our energy consumption. All of these topics kind of tie together where if we talk about tariffs, what is the goal of tariffs is to bring manufacturing back into the US. okay, and production back into the US. Well, what does that mean? We need better infrastructure. We're going to use more energy. So the funding is there right now, which is great to be able to go and build these things. Well, we can build them, but more buildings, more production, more people at these jobs means more energy. And we talk about the electric cars, those types of things. We just know that our infrastructure is not going to be able to handle the energy consumption into the future. So the only solution is how do we fix these things that are taking the energy? Electric motors consume like 50 plus almost 60% of the energy in the US. So what can we do as an industry, specifically on my end in the electric motor industry, to make sure our consumption is reduced? Well, it's higher efficiency motors and higher efficiency pumping systems within the pumping industry means variable speed, which the idea behind variable speed, Tom, is you only use what you need, right? It's a single speed pumping system pumps one output. And then you can do things to it that are very inefficient to slow it down. But why don't you take the motor down, slow the speed down, and only use the energy that you need? So the idea there is variable speed pumping system. So I say all this to kind of understand where the industry is going to go no matter what. Whether or not these DOE regulations and the efficiency regulations go through federal government, we talk with NEMA. One of my counterparts here at Nidec is the leader of the technical side of NEMA. And we are already hearing that if the federal portion of these motor efficiency regulations don't go through, there are a group of 13 or so states that are going to make them statewide regulations because the states know that they have to regulate that amount of energy that they are. But the biggest issue that I think us as a consumer, taking my production hat off or my business hat off and putting my consumer hat on, is this is going to cause me to pay a lot more, right? That sticker shock.
What are manufacturers doing to limit that sticker shock that you're talking about?
That's a really important thing to understand as a manufacturer, because when we talk about energy efficiency and going through that, like I mentioned, this big gap between a single speed and a variable speed system, I'll call it, is there. And so as manufacturers, we have to look at it and say, what is the minimum needed to be able to still get that energy efficiency? So when you're talking about variable speed product, let's strip it down and not have all the bells and whistles or have this huge HDMI or something along those, our human interface system, right? We don't need anything big like that. What's the simplest version we can do? Do we just need a simple input output to increase speed or decrease speed? A lot of the systems that we're seeing specifically on some of these DOE regulations that are coming in on circulator pumps, we don't need this high intelligence on the motor drives. It's just something simple. So as a manufacturers, as an industry, we have to start thinking about product that is not this up here, right? We like, especially the engineer in me, loves to say, hey, what's the best thing we can have? Well, let's go down and say, what's the thing that's going to be the best for the consumer price wise? Maybe we have both of those types of products. The other thing is looking at your current variable speed product, because right now the motor industry is continuing to innovate, right? And so we are focused right now. The regulations require IE3 or NEMA premium efficiency. So what's that next level? Motor manufacturers have the next level of efficiency. So how can we make product that is a drop-in replacement and they can still use their current drive, VFD, variable frequency drive, so that the sticker shock, again, for changing out these systems to not have such a large impact on capital is going to be key moving forward for both the supply component manufacturers like me with the electric motors, as well as the pump manufacturers within the industry, so that that sticker shock is limited. We've got to put on, again, I'm going to go back to the hat metaphor, right? We got to put on our consumer hat and say, maybe they don't need all of the bells and whistles. So what can we put in? What kind of product do we need to develop in that?
All right. So before we wrap up this episode, is there anything else you want to add or any final thoughts you would like to leave us with?
No, I think the final thought And if you haven't got it from the podcast, is there is a lot going on specifically with the administration, policy, tariffs, all of that. So just keep in contact with your manufacturers, your suppliers in the industry here, things like the Pumps and Systems podcast, in order to just know what's going on. And I can guarantee it's going to continue to change. So what you hear here could change tomorrow, could change a year from now. But the key is there's these baseline things that are always going to stay around. We as a pump industry need to have the ideas of what's coming through the future, right? We're going to have to go to this energy efficiency. It's going to be the betterment of the future. So it's not, maybe it might be a little bit harder in the next couple months or the next year or two to really push our new product or our product because we're not getting the funding in certain areas. But we as the industry have to kind of put our goggles on and say, you know what, we know this is going to go down there and really push that. And we all know how innovation works. There's going to be some cool things coming out. Some of it will get taken right away. Some of it won't. But the industry here, it is always viewed as a slow in an industry, or the better term I hear sometimes is, not a sexy industry. But I'll tell you what, there is a pump or a motor within reaching distance of you right now, right? So that's the key here, is this industry is going to be around for a while. So we've got to make sure that we're looking down to the future on making sure that those are right. And the policies are always going to be up and down, but we as an industry stick together here and really focus on the future.
Okay, well then, I will say thank you for taking time to be here with us and tell us so many interesting things. And yeah, we really appreciate you being here.
All right. Thank you very much, Tom.
Huge thanks to Patrick for taking the time to speak with us today about the current uncertainties affecting the pumping industry. If you're listening to the podcast and would like the chance to watch it, head over to our YouTube page to see the full video version. That's going to do it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening or watching, and we will see you next time.